I've always been a bit scared about being out as a teacher. But then when I became really ill, and this was something, a very, very serious illness, and it was something which I needed a transplant for, it was a big moment for me, I suppose, in life. And so recovering from that, one of the things that really changed my view was someone lending me the film Milk, and that was about a famous US politician who was over in San Francisco, and he was the first openly gay politician. And he had this phrase, which was that sort of come out, be yourself, because when they know one of us, we won't be the strangers anymore. And that really struck me, and I remember thinking, I've sort of been given a second chance at life here, really, and this is an extraordinary generous thing someone does to donate their organs, a liver in my case. And I just thought, right, I need to make a difference. So I went back to the school, and the head teacher, Martin Post, was brilliant, and I sat down and said, look, I want to do this. And he said, well, you've got my complete backing, sort of take it in stages. I said, okay, great. So the first thing was just having a conversation in class. And fortunately, it sort of happened fairly organically. I just got engaged, and I was fiddling around with my wedding ring, and absent-mindedly nearly dropped it. And a student at the front said, oh, sir, she'll be really cross if you drop it. And I said, oh, it's a he, actually. I just split-moment decision, that's the time. And that you could see sort of little, if they weren't paying attention before, they were at that point. And what was really interesting, they said, oh, did you say he? And I was like, yeah, that's right. My partner's a man, we're going to get civil partnered. And sort of slight shock in the room. But actually, after that lesson, we quite rapidly got back to what was a great physics lesson, actually. And that was it, really. And I kind of thought, oh, someone's going to say something. Nobody really did. And so, feeling a bit emboldened, I went back to Martin Post and said, right, I'd like to do some assemblies. So I did assemblies for all the year groups. And I said, I want to talk about the language, LGBT language, and the laws and the science behind it, and what does it mean in terms of the way we work with each other. And it was scary, because I'd been at that school as a student as well. But it was also felt like a really amazing thing to do. And people said thank you afterwards. A few people had questions. And even a few years later, I had people sending me messages saying, that was amazing, thank you. And so then, I was then someone who was just openly being me, being gay in school. And even if they never asked me a question, they just knew, yeah, I know someone now. And I thought that made a big difference. I wondered if colleagues might react negatively, and I thought there were some people who were quite devout and religious, and maybe that's an issue. Nobody said anything, and some people said, well done for doing that, and it's prompted these conversations. I wondered about parents as well, actually. That was almost my biggest fear, that the school would get a whole load of complaints. It never did. I know there are other teachers who'd have similar circumstances where there have been parental complaints, but with the right support and the right thinking, actually you can deal with that. If you can be someone who makes it known without making a big deal of it, then that's a very powerful thing. And the advice really is keep it going. And if I have one regret, is that I kind of did it once, and then it's a small follow-up later, but I really wish I'd sort of followed through and helped the school through these transformation programs. They weren't really there so much in 2010, or they weren't so well known, and they are now. And I think you can do a really powerful thing by actually just helping senior leaders and governors, and then maybe people at other schools. So I think number one, do your research. Make sure you've read how other people have done this. Ideally, make sure you have the support of senior leaders. Unfortunately, there will be senior leaders who say, oh, no, don't. Actually, you shouldn't do that. But you should speak to your union, you should speak to colleagues. It's something which is done best where the whole school takes an approach at the same time. And there are amazing programs from Stonewall and Educate and Celebrate and diversity role models and all sorts of amazing programs out there. There's books out there now which schools can read. You need to think a little bit, because suddenly you might be someone where children come and confide more things to you because of who you've now become this symbol. So you need to think about safeguarding issues, but don't feel scared of that. The fact that you are there means people will be more open with you potentially than they would have done before. Preparation is really important, but also think of the difference you'll make. You can be that teacher you needed when you were at school. Be that role model, and that can make an enormous difference. And interestingly, just a couple of months ago, I was back in the school, and a student who's in the sixth form said, actually, I chose this school over another school because I saw the article you'd written about it, and I'd written a little piece in The Guardian sort of a year after, and I saw that and thought, well, if it's a school where a teacher can do that, this is a school for me. And I thought, well, it's still making a difference, so actually that feels important. That feels like I'm still proud of doing that, even though I wrote about it, and hundreds of other teachers do the same and maybe never write about it, but for every single one that does, it's a very powerful thing. There was a bit of media buzz at the time, and I used that opportunity to set up something called Out Teacher, a website. But more recently, these two fantastic teachers now turned that into something called LGBT Ed. So that's a network for any LGBT educator, teacher, teaching assistant, anyone who works in education, a network where they can come together and they can really think about how do we become this sort of community of LGBT educators.